President, we're grateful to today's briefers. The situation with the food security is a serious problem for the international community. Its reasons are complex and they began long before current situation. And not only armed conflicts play an important role in this, but also unilateral sanctions by Western states. The use of hunger as a method of waging war has no justification. This rule was definitively enshrined in the first additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions on the protection of civilians during wartime. At the same time, it's important that this norm was the direct result of the blockade of Leningrad, which was carried out by German and Finnish forces when the city was surrounded with the goal of starving it to death. As a result of the use of hunger as a means of waging war, over 600,000 people died in Leningrad. In today's armed conflicts, a particular threat is represented by terrorist and extremist groups which conduct war without respect for any rules. Of particular concern is the continued increase of the terrorist threat in the Sahara and Sahel region, as well as the group ISIL Khorasan in Afghanistan, which targets representatives of religious and ethnic minorities. In Syria and Yemen, the situation has stabilized, but even there, the humanitarian situation continues to be dire. People continue to lack the most basic necessities, including food and medicines. As far as Syria, we see that, including in the report of the Secretary General on the protection of civilians, that the main problems are a consequence of the illegal interference into internal affairs and the occupation of the country. This is the result of airstrikes of the so-called foreign coalition and rampant violence by terrorist groups on territory not under the control of Damascus. These groups are responsible for most of the crimes committed. At the same time, the civilian population continues to suffer on the territories of Syria occupied by the United States and forces under their control, including from the looting of natural resources. For many years, the horrific situation in camps of Rugban, Al-Hol, and Rosh continues on territory controlled by the United States. We call on the Secretary General to continue to carefully monitor this disturbing situation and more actively draw the attention of the international community to it. The difficult humanitarian situation in Syria is to a large extent due to the fact that the United States and the EU continue to apply illegal unilateral sanctions against Syrians, which lead to catastrophic consequences for the civilian population. As can be seen in the report of the Secretary General, sanctions have a negative impact on the provision of humanitarian assistance, on which people in conflict areas often depend for their survival, and this applies not only to Syria. We call on the Secretary General to continue investigating this issue, and we'd like to note that the specific report on Syria that was promised in January has still not been published. We're convinced that hunger is also a method of economic war that West is conducting around the world. It arbitrarily shuts down opportunities for trade in foodstuffs. One clear example of this practice is the situation around the Black Sea grain initiatives. We've already expressed our views on the situation during the meeting of the Security Council on the 15th of May on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, and we will continue drawing attention to the real situation there. Just a few figures. The least developed countries receive less than 3% of all deliveries in the framework of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Over the 10 months of its operation in the framework of the humanitarian operation of the World Food Program from Ukraine, only 600,000 tons of food of the overall volume of over 30 million have been delivered. And most of these exports went to developed countries. We'd like to draw your particular attention to the deliveries of ammonia specified in the Istanbul agreements. This could ensure the deliveries of some 2.5 million raw materials, which is enough for 7 million of tons of fertilizer. That amount of fertilizer would make it possible to produce food for 200 million people. These deliveries were supposed to begin at the same time as transport of Ukrainian foodstuffs. However, that did not occur. Today, In the almost 1 year of the Black Sea Initiative, due to undelivered cargoes, the shortage of ammonia on global markets is 70%. As far as the UN-Russia memorandum about the delivery of Russian foodstuffs, its implementation has effectively not even begun. The EU and the United States have refused to block access to the SWIFT system of the Russian Agricultural Bank, and they're not resolving other problems due to conflicts due to the sanctions which we mentioned before, including in shipping, insurance, and agricultural technology. So that Kiev and its Western mentors are blocking access to food and at the same time blaming everyone else for it. And yet we, in spite of the dirty games around these agreements, intend to continue being guided by the need to making a contribution to ensuring international food security, including for developing countries, by overcoming artificial barriers. Everything that was achieved by our grain and fertilizer exports is their individual achievement, because neither the UN or the so-called Western exemptions have nothing to do with it. As in the past, our country is one of the main suppliers of agricultural production in the world, and we've earned a reputation as a reliable and predictable partner, and we intend to continue working in that spirit.